welcome to episode number 80 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. This is Jason Fallon, the esports and gaming insider for Fox PHL The Gambler, hoping you are having a stellar and safe week this week. Been a stressful one for me here, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to get right into the latest and greatest in esports and video games. Not so much on the esports side this week, just because there's not a lot to talk about. I'll address some in the 6 and 60. But other than that, two fantastic interviews bookending the segments this week, starting with Steve Fallon, a Fantasy Critic, in segment 1, and the great people at Games on State Street here in Media, Delaware County, in Part 3, talking about their new establishment and how you can go in and enjoy some gaming on your downtime. In the middle, I will talk about games for Fantasy Critic coming out this year that I think could be steals, or games that you might want to avoid, going full fantasy football mode on this Fantasy Critic in this episode 80. But before we do anything, let's get right in to the 6 in 60 seconds. The 12th Call of Duty League team finally has a name, as the Boston Breach brand and roster was officially revealed ahead of the 2022 Call of Duty League season. League of Legends Lock-In Tournament begins Friday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern with Team Solo Mid versus 100 Thieves. Elsewhere, Naraka Blade Points World Championship has been scheduled for this weekend with a $1.5 million prize pool. The 25th Annual DICE Award nominees have been revealed. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart leading the pack at 9, Deathloop with 8, and Inscription and It Takes Two tied for 6 nominations each. Microsoft has discontinued production of the Xbox One consoles at the end of 2020, only revealing it this week, with only Xbox Series X and S produced since. And finally, Twitter has revealed the top 10 most tweeted about games of 2021, with MiHoYo's Genshin Impact taking the top slot. Those are your 6 in 60 seconds. And those 6 in 60 seconds are brought to you today by the sponsor for Cheesesteaks and Controllers, that is Ghost Shaver. The Ghost Shaver is designed to feel like an extension of your arm, allowing a user to reach anywhere on the head, face, or body. The precision cutting system gives you a close and smooth shave every single time, thanks to 5 different rotary flex action super thin blades and a patented handle design that fits into the palm of your hand precisely. Go to ghostshaver.com to check things out and get one for yourself. That's Ghost Shaver, a shave above the rest. Yes, folks, there they are, your 6 in 60 seconds for the week, your latest updates and everything happening in video games and esports. But I want to move right along here to our first interview of the day. I don't know if you know this, but there is a fantasy video game industry app out there emulating fantasy football and other fantasy sports that you have played, but one where you can focus on the video game industry and the games that come out every single year. As an interesting little scoring system, a very unique approach to fantasy, if you ask me. I played my first full season in 2021, about to hold my live streamed draft tomorrow night, January 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/jfan64. So I thought I would bring in someone to explain what this is and how the idea came about, so why not go to the top guy? With me right now from Fantasy Critic is Steve Fallon, here to talk about his app and how you can get started with it today. Steve, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Glad to hear from you, sir. So Fantasy Critic, obviously I've been playing fantasy football for a long time. It's really the only fantasy sport I really got into. But to hear that there was one now about the gaming industry and how games were critically received when they came out, where did this idea first arise from?
It came from me playing fantasy football for the first time. So my first job at a college, there were a lot of football fans there, but I was never a sports person. But they got me into it, and I started playing fantasy football. And at the beginning, I played fantasy football very poorly. I should say that my draft in 2017, I drafted a kicker in the second round.
Oh, no.
Yeah, my first pick was Aaron Rodgers. My second pick was Matt Prater, because I thought, hey, he's got the record for the longest kick of all time at the time. That obviously I want him on my team. So obviously I was very bad at fantasy football at the beginning. But I started to take that a little bit more seriously. I got really into fantasy football. Then I asked some of my friends outside of work if they wanted to do a fantasy football league, and they were pretty much like, no, that's not our thing. So I started to think up other ideas of what we could do, and that's when I thought of Fantasy Critic, which at the beginning was just a Google Doc. There was no website for it. It was just a set of rules and a spreadsheet that we played over the course of 2018. And we had a good time with it. And I am a programmer by trade, so I think that this idea is good enough that I'm gonna put the time in and try to make a website out of this. And I launched it in December 2018, and we've run for a full 3 years now. 2022 is our 4th year in operation.
Wow, since 2018, I'm surprised it took me 2-3 years to learn about it. It really is something that is in my wheelhouse, and the more I went through it, I realized just how different it is strategically from your normal fantasy football experience. For one thing, make sure you draft games with solid release dates. I got stuck with three, but one was a counter pick. 2 games this year that were supposed to come out in 2021 and just didn't, but never told anybody. So it dropped me from 1st to 3rd, but we'll get into how that all works. And so when you first developed this, was the scoring system always what it is now, which is you get 1 point for every number over 70 that a game scores on Open Critic? So, for example, if a game averages 75, you get 5 points. If a game averages 80, 10 points, so on and so forth. Was that always the scoring structure that you wanted to go with, or were there other ideas thrown around?
It has always been very close to that because, so first off, for 2018, when we did it just in the Google Doc, it was Metacritic. But then when I actually made the site, I found it easier to talk to OpenCritic, who I actually have had conversations with, than approaching, big giant company Metacritic. So I'm very happy, very thankful to OpenCritic for allowing me to use their data to run Fantasy Critic. But as far as the points over under 70, things like that, I certainly didn't want a game that didn't come out to be equivalent to a game getting a 0. So I thought that I think a lot of gamers consider 70 kind of the average for a game. That's kind of the way it's been for a while. Everything below 70 is like, probably skip it. And everything above 70 is how good is it? So that felt like the natural place. The only change that's come in over time is, from the beginning, points over 90 were worth more to incentivize people to go for big games. Like, a 90 gets you 20 points because it's 20 points over 70. But a 95 gets you 30 points because the points 90 to 95 are each worth 2.
Wow.
And the reason for that is, to me, what's the difference between an 81 and an 87?
Not a whole lot.
81 is a solid game, and an 87 is, a Game of the Year nominee kind of thing. But you get plenty of those every year. A 91 to a 97 is Game of the Year contender to, is this the best game ever made?
Right. That's fair.
I think those points at the 90s, people do look at those different. And then what I did starting in 2021 is I actually flipped that for the low scores. It used to be every point below 70 would lose you points. So if your game got a 0 or if it got a 15, you're losing, 70 or 55 points or something like that, which is nuts. You lose instantly if you happen to draft a game that gets a 38. So the way it works now is points below 70 from 60 to 70 are still -1, so a 60 will get you -10 points. But the further you go down, the less each point matters. So there's basically diminishing returns on how bad a game is, because what's really the difference between a game getting a 20 and a game getting a 40?
Nothing.
You're not playing either of them.
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot of difference between 20 and 30 or 30 and 40. You're not. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. So so what you're saying is, like, so at 70 to 60 is 10 points, but like 60 to 50 or 60 to 50 could be maybe 5.
Yep, a 50 will get you minus 15.
Okay.
Because each of those points is minus a half.
Right.
And then 40 to 50, each of those is minus a quarter.
And then so on
it's
and
like,
so forth.
It's, an asymptote in math terms where
Wow.
the points, 0 to 10 are each minus like 0.002.
Yep.
And like, if the game actually got a 0, you would lose like 19.87 points or something like that.
Okay.
Whereas if the game got a 20, you'd lose 19 flat. Like those bottom points barely make a difference.
That makes sense. Because you don't want to.
Who really cares about this game got a 5 versus this game got a 21?
Sure. And honestly, that keeps people invested. It's like you said before, if it was minus 1 point for every point under 70, eventually one person has one dud and they're out for the year, right? They don't care anymore.
That's what I wanted to avoid.
And also, there's more numbers between 70 and 0 than there are between 71 and 100. Yeah. So you have to account for that. But it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, but I think everyone would agree, there is more difference in the quality of a game between a 91 and a 97 than even a 65 to a 18.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. So your scoring system, makes a lot of sense. But I also want to talk a little bit about the ways that you can mess with your fellow players. There is the counter pick, which I mentioned earlier, but I'm noticing that there are some other new features that you're coming out with this year. The blue shell is one that I really have my eye on. So walk me through some of the things that you're adding this year for people who want to sign up this year, as far as ways that you can make your league more interesting.
Sure, well, since you mentioned it, I'll start with the blue shell. And I do borrow that term from Mario Kart, although it won't quite work like that, but I think it gets the point across. I want to provide a way for players that are really far behind to take a mulligan on a mistake. In Mario Kart, obviously, you don't get the blue shell if you're in second place. You get the blue shell when you're far back.
Right.
And the way, I haven't finalized the exact details yet, but it's basically going to work like this. If you are so far behind that you have no reasonable chance of catching up, it's halfway through the year and you have less than half of the projected final points as the person in first or something like that, then you'll get a free super drop. So we haven't talked about drops yet, but depending on your league rules, you can drop a game that's confirmed not going to come out in the year you're playing for. If you're playing 2022... and Breath of the Wild 2 gets confirmed, it's 2023, and your league allows it, you can drop that game.
Yep.
And then you can get something else. But the super drop from the blue shell will be no questions asked, you can drop that. It already came out, you have Balan Wonderworld from last year, and you lost 15 points, go ahead and drop it. You counterpicked Breath of the Wild, and it did come out, and now you're done. Go ahead and drop it. It'll be an option. You don't have to turn this on in your league, but if you find, because let's be honest, there are a lot of leagues that are absolutely dominated by one player.
Yeah.
Maybe they're dominated by 2 players, and the other people really don't have a shot. So if you find yourself in that sort of situation, the blue shell might be for you.
Yeah. That's a cool feature. I really think we're going to be implementing that. I'm not sure. I don't know if we voted on it yet, but I really like that idea because, our league was actually very even. Like I said, I not to toot my own horn, I led for most of the year, but then towards the end of the year, I had 2 guys pass me, partly because of the drop system, which we'll get into, and partly because they just backloaded their roster to the point where they were able to pass me. So that's part of the whole like thinking for an entire year strategy that I was getting at when I introduced you. But let's get into that drop system for a second. So the way my league works is, and you can tell me if this is standard, as you mentioned, if a game is confirmed not to be coming out in that calendar year, you can drop them unlimited, no questions asked. However, if a game is coming out that calendar year, we only get 1.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. It's is coming out, or at least could come out.
Right, has not been deconfirmed for 2022 yet.
Which means that those games like Silksong, which might have been one of the games,
that is
go
one
radio
of the
silent,
games.
that go completely radio silent, you're stuck with it.
Yeah, that is.
It's one of the risks of indie games. When a company, to get into the real technicals behind here, when a company is publicly traded, they probably do have to tell you that Breath of the Wild is delayed. But Team Cherry is under no obligation to tell anybody that Silksong is delayed.
That's awesome. And yeah, that was the one that burned me. And in fact, it burned me twice because I originally said after E3, I was like, I don't trust this game anymore. I'm dropping it. And then I realized that Game Awards were still going to happen. And I was like, I don't want to have egg on my face if this gets shadow dropped at the Game Awards. So I picked it up again. And then in desperation, picked up Sports Story, which burnt me too. Oh, man. And that's why I went from first to third. That right there, I will not make that mistake.
Did anybody
again.
pick up Shovel Knight late?
No. By then, we were all pretty much locked in.
Okay. Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon was a pretty big late in the year game.
Yeah. Yeah, that I imagine that could be one that made or broke people as far
that made me. That was my league winner.
Oh, there you go. See, look at this. Look at the strategy we're talking about games releasing. That's the magic of Fantasy Critic, if you ask me, and why I'm so enamored with it. So we are recording this on the 7th of January. It will be airing on the 14th. So there's a week between the interview and the actual airing of it. How many drafts have you done so far?
Ooh. Last year I was in 5 leagues, but that's about average, so somewhere in the neighborhood of 15.
15 total? I'm sorry, I meant just in 2022, this year.
Oh, just in 2022, only one.
Only one so far. Okay, so from that, is there a game, A, that you feel like was highly in contention right from the jump, other than the obvious? Like, obviously, Horizon's going to be in a top 5 spot because it has a date. It's coming out soon. Games like Pokemon Legends Arceus is probably getting drafted high. But was there one game that got drafted pretty high, maybe first 2 or first 3 rounds, that you thought, that's a surprise?
Well, let's see, actually. So, honestly, I think Pokemon Legends Arceus fits that category of I wouldn't do it, because I'm real nervous about that game. And I like Pokemon. I want that game to be good.
Yeah, me too.
I think that the perfect version of that game, like if you imagine that game developed by exactly the team that you want developing it on the most capable hardware possible. Pokemon Legends Arceus is a 97, but we're not going to get that version of that game. We are going to get the Game Freak running poorly on the Nintendo Switch version of that game, and I think people are going to be disappointed in it.
Bold words from Steve Fallon here, creator of Fantasy Critic. So go ahead, sorry.
But the game that surprised me, let's see. I don't know. Honestly, my bigger takeaway, more than game that surprised me, is trust the wisdom of the crowd. Because the site will rank the most popular games for the year, and they're usually pretty reasonable. Like, when I look at the top games, Elden Ring is the number 1, and I think that is the right answer. Like, if you have the first overall pick, I think you should be taking Elden Ring. It comes out in February. FromSoft hasn't missed yet. And people have already played the beta, and they love it. Like, that's, to me, the clear number 1.
That's fair.
Maybe, I guess, I'm a little dubious that God of War or Breath of the Wild 2 will actually come out this year. But it's probably worth the risk, because those are 94s, probably.
Yeah, and the worst thing that happens to you is you get counterpicked and you just get a 0, which is what happened with me for Horizon.
Oh, yeah, and counterpicking, though, that's a bold strategy.
Yeah. So let's get into that just a little bit before I talk about maybe a game that you drafted that you're high on that some people aren't, because I want one of those too. Counterpicking in Fantasy Critic is the ability to pick something that a friend already drafted. They cannot drop it anymore, and the scoring gets reversed for you. So if you counterpick someone's game and it gets a 65, they lose 5 points, but you gain 5 points. So you have to pick a game that you think is going to be a dud and force them to stick with it when it's launched. So in our first year, a lot of our counterpicks were used for games that we didn't think were going to come out. So we counterpicked on games that we thought would be goose eggs, and most of them were. Gotham Knights was my counterpick. Horizon Forbidden West was counterpicked for me. What was another one? I think God of War Ragnarok was a counterpick, and a couple of other ones. Games that were worth the risk because you have so many slots that if you get a 0, you can manage. But if it comes out, it's going to blow. It's going to blow your score sky high. So, what were you counterpicked with this year? What did someone say? No, I don't trust that.
This year, nobody counterpicked me.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm in a 20-person league.
Wow.
Is the only league that I have drafted in so far. My leagues that I have run or been in years past haven't drafted yet. The only one I've played this year is a league that got organized by someone on the Fantasy Critic Discord, and I've typically told people that don't do a league too big, and 20 is the site's limit. But they said they wanted to do a huge league, and I said, you know what, I'm interested in seeing how the site behaves in a 20-person league, so I'll join. But I have not gotten counterpicked.
Interesting. Wow, 20-person league. Well, ours was 6 last year. We're trying to make it 8, possibly 10 this year.
I think 6 is my favorite number. 6 is the original number of the original league.
Oh, is
the one
it?
that we ran in 2018. Yeah.
Interesting. See, if you're listening to this and you were part of my league, we did it right in year 1. How about that? I am interested to see what happens in year 2, though, with 2 extra people, just to see how the picks go. But yeah, it's 6. It felt like a sweet spot because everybody was able to, dip into the triple A's without feeling left out, but also stack some indies or leave some empty spots for things that were announced that were coming out later in the year. You know what I mean? I thought that was a nice little sweet spot too. We'll see if 8 works. 20 is probably a bloodbath.
Beyond just the number of players, obviously the most important thing as far as what games you're going to end up with is how many total games are there. So it's number of players times number of games per person. So like if you do a 20-person draft, but everybody only gets 2 games, that's actually not that big of a league.
Sure.
But the one I'm in is 20 people, 10 games. So that's
200 games getting drafted.
Yeah.
Now, see, I can log into mine right now and tell you what we did last year. Let me bring it up. Our league's name was Midway to Acclaim. Props to my buddy Dakota for that name. I thought it was awesome. So we had 6 people, but we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 slots, and 1 counter pick. 13 slots and 1 counter pick. That is, 13 by 6, 78 games?
I can't do that quick math.
So I think that's what that is. So yeah, and on our point totals ended up being 146 for the winner, 113 second place, 106 third, 101. So we had 4 people in the hundreds. And only one of us used their entire budget for picking up games. It's $100, I think, for the year, right? Being able to pick up games. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I thought. So yeah, and a couple people didn't even use all their slots. I'm looking at one guy, the guy who came in second place, 114, didn't use 2 slots. That shocks me. Why didn't he pick up Shovel Knight? I'm screaming.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm screaming, Sean. But yeah, so I wasn't going to remind him, but he did end up passing me anyway, so it didn't matter. But yeah, it's a fascinating platform. I really, really do enjoy it. I think you've done a great job with this, and it's only getting better year after year. Happy to be in the semi-sorta, maybe ground floor year 3, first 5 years. So as it just keeps going up and up and up, I will be able to say I was one of the quote-unquote early adopters. And if you can tell me that I'm wrong if you want to. But
no, I mean, hey, I haven't done this year. People are starting to want to interview me, which I find very fun.
Yeah.
I haven't done a whole lot of those yet. But this is our 4th year, 2022.
Oh, 4th year, right. 2018. Sorry, I'm thinking
2018 was like the development year, but the site was fully operational 2019, 20, 21, and 22.
And 22. Cool. All right. All right. Last question before I get you out of here. It's been a very great interview. I appreciate your time. What is the one game that you think is going to sneak up on people? What's the one game in your 10 that you drafted in your 20-person league that you're like, this one's going to get me up there and no one else thought of it?
Honestly, I think that this year's Forza Motorsport is pretty likely.
Okay.
And I think that people should be taking that because Forza always scores really well. It's maybe a bit of a boring pick, but I picked Forza Horizon 5 in a few leagues last year before it got announced because I believed the rumors. That was obviously a really critical game for me because I think they got a 92.
Huge hit. Yes, that was a big one.
But also, like, make sure you get Tunic or Triangle Strategy if they're available because those games are going to be good.
They
Those
are.
games are going to be good.
Those are the games that people like. I would say they're AAA, but if we're going to tier like S tier, A tier, B tier, I would put Triangle Strategy in that high B, low A, because the studio behind Octopath never misses. Every game they make has been great and received well by critics. This is a different take, being tactics, not the straight up JRPG, but I feel like the what they've shown so far has been very impressive, and it's only going to get more impressive, I think, as the weeks go on. So I am with you on that. So one last final little question: did you draft Starfield?
Not in this league,
But you might.
But I got burned in 2018 by Fallout 76.
Oh no!
If I hadn't taken Fallout 76 in 2018, I would have won that original league that year.
Oh no!
So I'm nervous a little bit about a Bethesda game at launch, as I think most people should be. But personally, yeah, I am very interested in Starfield. I'll probably end up taking it in at least one league.
Cool. And honestly, I have a feeling in the back of my head that I'm going to be the guy that takes it in this league and then looks at it for 10 months until it finally comes out, hoping that it'll get me some points. But Steve Fallon from Fantasy Critic, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for developing this program. It is a lot of fun. If you want to try it for yourself, if you and your friends are gamers and you want to try a new way to compete for fun or maybe throw a little bit of money on the line, this is Fox PHL, the gambler, after all. Go to fantasycritic.games, check out the system, create your league, get your friends together, draft it up. And if you want to see how the draft works, January 15th, tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, twitch.tv/jfan64. My league will be drafting Midway to Acclaim year number 2. Me and 7 friends will be drafting our rosters and getting ready for 2022. Steve, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to another great year.
Great, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And come back after the break. We will talk about some power rankings and maybe some sleeper hits for your Fantasy Critic draft. All right, welcome back to Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode 80. Thank you again to Steve Fallon from Fantasy Critic for stopping on the show to talk about his wonderful program. If you have not made yourself a draft, go to fantasycritic.games, check it out. If you want to join the Royale, where you don't have to be in a league and you can just play against everybody else, that's pretty cool too. But definitely take a look and see if there's anything you can do with that. There's like I said, the format is very, very cool. The approach that he has taken is very novel, and I think that this is going to be something that could be huge as the years go on. But breaking off from the actual explanation of what it is, I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty and the strategy here. My draft is Saturday, so if you're listening to this when the podcast goes up, it is tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. My league, Midway to Acclaim, will be drafting our Fantasy Critic games, and we invite you to come and watch over at my Twitch channel. It's going to be a good time. I'm really excited. I love the guys, the group of folks that I'm with. We have a good time. 7 this year. We added one more. A good man by the name of Trevor has joined us this year. Excited to see how he adds an extra wrinkle to what's going on here. But I want to take a look at the list of games on Fantasy Critic's website. So they have the master games list that are sorted by the number of estimated points and also hype factor, which is like how into these games people are. And there are a couple that I want to take a look at right here that I think are going to overperform, and a couple that I think are going to underperform based on what is shown here. Now, it is hard to really get a gauge on underperformance because, like, a game like Total War Warhammer 3, for example, is estimated to get about 10 points in his system, which would put the Open Critic score at about 80. And honestly, that's where I see Total War Warhammer 3 being. A bit of a niche game is the Total War Warhammer series. Not everyone obviously plays it, but I feel like there is definitely some potential there for it to maybe become one of the best ever. You never know with these sorts of things, but that kind of sounds right to me. Some of these sound a little low. Like, I feel like if they come out, maybe the issue is we don't know if they're going to come out this year. For example, Stray, the Annapurna Interactive indie game where you play as a cat in a world full of robots, that's estimated to be 8.2. I feel like Annapurna for the most part, has earned the reputation of putting out games that are, we're talking mid to high 80s. 12 minutes was a bit of a divisive one, but for the most part, Annapurna knows the kind of games that we are looking for. They're a bit like Devolver in that sense, just a different sort of game. So if we say that the average score for Stray is an 85, that's 15 points. It's estimated 8.2. That is one that could improve. So I'm going to go through some things. Stray is not one of them. That's just an example, although I've made a pretty good case for it, I guess. I'm going to go through some of the games on here that I feel like are really being undersold, and a couple that I feel like are worthy of more of a look. Should they come out this year, I really think they're going to be more impressive than what is being presented in this list. And the first one that comes to mind is Redfall. Redfall is the multiplayer shooter from Arcane that was revealed last year at the Xbox E3 conference that they had on that, was it Sunday, I think, or Monday of E3 that year in June, or last year in June. Redfall was the last game announced at that conference, the multiplayer shooter from Arcane, who just also released Deathloop, one of the highly touted games of 2021, one of the best performers for sure in last year's Fantasy Critic. Right now, only predicted at a 5.6, and I feel like that is super low. For the pedigree of Arcane with Dishonored and Dishonored 2 and Deathloop, as I mentioned, and the first trailer really showing a very interesting and engaging world, I feel like that's a bit, underselling Redfall a little bit. Now, is it going to make that summer 2022 estimate? We don't know. That could be a factor. We obviously also haven't seen gameplay yet, so we're just basically going off of CGI hype. Always a dangerous proposition there. So maybe that's why the score for Redfall is a little bit lower than I expected it to be, the estimated score. But that could be one that could offer a lot of value in a draft, or even in a bidding situation after your draft concludes. Another one in a similar vein, and I think this one is lower because it does not have a set release date yet, but it's the type of game that could have a release date of, a Shadow Drop or something like that. That's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, the return to the retro 2D side-scrolling brawler for the Ninja Turtles by the team at .emu. 5.4 points is the current estimate, and I really think if that game comes out, it is going to excel here. I'm talking at least 10 points for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. A 80 average makes way more sense to me than a 75, which is where it would be right now. Maybe I'm putting a little too much emphasis on the retro. Maybe I have a little bit of rose-tinted glasses there, but that one just seems awfully low for a game of that caliber and with such excitement behind it when it was first announced. Another indie title that I am very, very much considering to be a dark horse is Somerville. Again, first shown at the Xbox conference last year. It's like a pixel art sort of game where you're defending your family against all kinds of different threats, and it's just every trailer I see or everything I see about that game is super engaging. If it makes 2022, that is going to be one that's going to make a lot of rosters. I think as well. It just has to get itself a solid release date so that I don't draft it and then sit on it the entire year like I did with Hollow Knight Silksong. I really would like to avoid the Silksong effect again if I could. So those are a couple of games that I think are going to overperform. There are some that I would like to say are going to overperform. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 being one of them. Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp being another. But Advance Wars 1 and 2 can't stop getting delayed, so who knows when that's coming out. And Senua's Saga doesn't even have a 2022 estimate. It just has a TBA. All we know about that game is that it exists. So I need to see a solid date, or at least more than the gameplay that we saw at the Game Awards, before I would draft it. Now, is it a possibility that could be an early 2023 game? Yes, absolutely there is. But I can't draft that then. It won't come out this year. I need to make sure that I have the strongest 2022 candidates on my squad, so I might leave that alone. Ghostwire Tokyo is another one. This one sits at 7 points, which would be a 77 aggregate. And I really don't have a lot of confidence in this game. I should. The developer is wonderful. Something about this game is not sitting right with me. It's not where I want it to be. I haven't seen enough from the trailers that really makes me want to jump out of my skin. And that is it's just one that I can't justify drafting myself. I don't know if any of my fellow league mates are going to join me in that. We'll see. But Ghostwire Tokyo would be one that I would counter pick should somebody draft that on Saturday. Talked about Stray earlier. That could be one of the ones that I think is going to fly under the radar here. But Tunic is another. Let's not forget about Tunic. Now, we've known about this game for a long time. The indie adventure game with the fox-looking character who also is in a mini Zelda game of his own. This is one that I think is going to be a huge get, a huge success coming out this year on March the 16th, just because of how highly anticipated it is and how it's going to play. This is one that I could see racking up a ton of points and way more than the 8.2 it is currently estimated at. So we're talking 78 is where it currently sits. And this is another one that I think will be low 80s, if not mid 80s. If we're getting into another one that I am scared of, even with the 13-minute gameplay trailer that came out today, Thursday, something about Pokemon Legends Arceus is not sitting right with me. I denied it at first. I thought that the feelings that I had for this game were just because I hadn't seen a lot of gameplay. I didn't know what to expect other than, big, vast worlds and almost like a Breath of the Wild, quote-unquote, Xenoblade sort of thing with this Pokemon game. But the more I watch it, the more I just have this uneasy feeling. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it scores very, very good and starts this league off with a bang for whoever drafts it. But something about that game does not sit with me. I don't know if it's the style of the game. I don't know if it's the setting. I don't know what it is. But I'm uneasy about that one. And I won't have to wait long to find out because it comes out in 15 days. So, Nintendo, hopefully you're going to prove me wrong there, because right now I'm just not feeling that one. That one kind of worries me in the grand scheme of things. So, but if you take a look at the list of games over on fantasycritic.games, it's top game, and I've sorted this by games that are unreleased, and there's a couple of tags that I'm not going to read because in my league we ban a few tags. So games that are in early access don't count, director's cut games don't count, ports don't count, remasters, and any games that were released internationally outside North America only. So those are the tags that we have banned in our league. So we can't draft any games that fit that bill. And I say this because the God of War port and the Death Stranding director's cut port both fall under port, and therefore we can't draft them again. So the top games are Elden Ring at 13.7 projected points, Horizon at 13.6, God of War Ragnarok at 13.4. No argument from me. All three of those games are huge, and I feel like they are going to really do their fan bases proud with that one. Same with Horizon Forbidden West, which is second with 13.6 points, a 0.1 difference between the two top new games of 2022. That's amazing. God of War Ragnarok comes in at 13.4. Then Breath of the Wild 2, which doesn't even have a release date yet, other than 2022, is 12.4. It's 12.4, excuse me. And then Gran Turismo is a solid 12. Those are your top 5. That's where we sit there. Expanding it to 10, you have Cuphead, the Delicious Last Course at 11.5. Bayonetta 3 at 11.2. Hollow Knight Silk Song at 10.3. Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope at 10.3. And Total War Warhammer 3 at 10.1. The game I said I did not trust is in the top 10 projected points of the year. That is interesting. I may have to reevaluate that one. But yeah, the list is here. All the different numbers of all the different points and data points are here. You can build an entire draft around this if you're going to be playing it yourself or with a couple of buddies. Go out there and check it out. It is a lot of fun. Like I said, it's an interesting take on the fantasy genre. It lasts the entire year, so you're not really going to miss anything if you were to go on vacation or something like that. The league's not going anywhere, which is really cool. It's a fun little thing. It allows you to keep up with what games are releasing, which is neat. And I highly endorse you playing on it if you get the chance. FantasyCritic.games and also twitch.tv/jfan64 for this Saturday and the second annual Midway to Acclaim draft. Coming up on the other side, I have a fantastic interview with the owners of Game on State over there in State Street Media. Aimee and Dr. Eric Rubin join me to talk about their facility and what you can do and how you can do it. Stick around. All right, welcome back, folks, to segment number 3 of Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode 80, happening this week. And we are ending with a fantastic interview with 2, and I love when these interviews happen, local Delaware County folks. So, I don't know if you're aware of this, for those of you who live in Delaware County, but there is a brand new pay-to-play, pay-as-you-go arcade and gaming center right on State Street in the heart of media called Game on State. I have been looking at this ever since its grand opening, trying to get in there. I know my daughter and I would love to go in there and mess around for a while. And I happen to have the founders, the owners of Game on State, Aimee and Dr. Eric Rubin, with me right now to talk about this fantastic endeavor. How are you this morning, Rubins?
We're great.
We're good.
Thank you for joining me today. So first, let's talk about the idea here. I know that there have been things like this before in Delaware County. There was one over by the old Granite Run Mall back when I worked in there in the late 2000s. So what makes you think that now is a good time to bring something like this back, where people can just go in, enjoy arcade games, enjoy Xbox, stuff like that, and in a pay-as-you-go sort of format?
Eric, you want to take this question?
Sure, I'll be happy to. So, I am a child of the 70s. I was born in the 70s, grew up with video games, and I remember arcades. Although I didn't grow up in this area, I remember arcades as a kid and loving them. And they're very, very, it's a great nostalgic feeling to me. It brings back a lot of great memories of time at the Jersey Shore when I was a kid, playing skee ball, playing pinball, playing video games. My father and I would bond over these types of things when I was a kid. And for a very long time, I've said to Aimee that it would be great if we had an arcade in media. We have our own children, and we are very involved in the community. We are great supporters of the local school district, and what we see is that kids really at times struggle to find good places to gather and to get together and to do things. So when you take this memory of mine, this nostalgic great feeling of mine, and you put it together with what we saw as a need in the community, and you layer it on top of the fact that we watched our daughter during the COVID pandemic spend an entire year of her life in her room alone on her phone. In February, I approached Aimee and I said, let's talk about this again, and let's talk about this in a little bit of a different way. And in a second, I'm going to let Aimee take over and talk a little bit about what we did to merge our both of our passions together, to bring together and come together to formulate what ultimately became Game on State. So for me, it was that nostalgic feeling, my love of video games and arcades, that feeling of doing things together in a space like an arcade. And then I'm going to let Aimee talk a little bit about this concept of inclusiveness that is so near and dear to her heart.
Aimee, go right ahead.
So one of the things that we also found during the pandemic is we have 3 kids, and as Eric mentioned, State Street is such a wonderful place for families to come for dining under the stars, if you've been there, and it just has a real small town community feel to it. But what was missing was really something for the kids to do. And each one of my kids would agree about that. But one of the other missions that we are striving to fulfill is something I did a lot of research on for our own personal family reasons during the first part of the pandemic, and that is that something about customized and supported employment, and that is for individuals with special needs. And I found that there was a real need for individuals who are not necessarily taking the typical path after high school to be in a place in the community and working in the community and what that looks like. So together, Eric and I kind of combined these two passions and said, what would happen if we were to open up an arcade on State Street, and it could be a place for everybody, and we could make it for everyone, whether it's workers, whether it's patrons who come there. How can we create something that is inclusive for all? And that's kind of how Game on State was born on a February morning. And we said, could we do this? And the answer was yes, this was a possibility. And so we worked from that point on. We contacted some administration in the Rose Tree Media School District. They have something that's called the Top Shop, which is for their life skills program at the high school.
Cool.
And we knew that they were looking for a home because they had lost their lease when a store closed. And they're a pop-up shop that actually brings their high school students to work and gives them the skills and gives them the opportunity to be in the community. And we thought that if we could partner up with them, it would meet needs for both of us and our missions. And so we have partnered with the Top Shop, and they have a home at Game on State, and they're there during the week.
That's fantastic. The fact that you were able to combine both of these passions into a project like this that not only allows for that nostalgic feeling, and I'm right there with you, Dr. Rubin. I wasn't born in the 70s. I was born a little bit after that, but man, that growing up in the arcades is definitely something that I share. And also to be able to give back to the community in that way is really, really cool. To hear that is just makes it that much sweeter when I hear about this place. So let's get into a little bit of what is actually offered here in the store. I'm looking at your website right now, and I'm seeing a multitude of pinball machines and arcade games, but also you offer the ability to play on console. I see you have an Xbox Series X available, and a HTC Vive Cosmos Elite virtual reality headset, which is very, very cool as well. So walk me through what patrons may see, what they may want to do, and how they're going to be able to do that when they come to you for the first time.
Well, I'll take that from you, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you directly into the arcade, because we can talk about the candy shop that's in the front afterwards, because I know that everybody wants to talk about candy at some point.
That's true.
But the arcade has, at this point, approximately 25 video games, pinball machines, and other machines that are set to a free play mode. And what I mean by that is, rather than asking people to bring in pockets full of quarters, what we do is up front at the cash wrap, we have what you do is you pay for timed entry and exit. So you can come in, you can play for as little as 15 minutes while you're waiting for your dinner reservation at one of the great media restaurants that we have. You could play a half hour, you could play an hour, you could play 2 hours. And you pay that flat fee, and you go in and you play all of those video games, pinball machines. We have a skee ball machine. We have a Super Chex hockey machine in there. And we have console games. Not only do we have an Xbox in there, the newest generation Xbox, but we also have an emulator that allows you to play all of the original Nintendo Entertainment System games. We have an emulator that lets you play all of the original Sega Genesis games. Our pinball machines range from the 1960s all the way up to a machine from 2021. Our video game machines are a combination of the classic video games in their classic cabinets with that classic feel to some that are a little more modern, and that will give you the ability to really bridge that generational gap, in my opinion, because what it does is it lets, if you come in with your kids, you're going to say, listen, I used to play on a machine just like this, or you can say, hey, let's play this one, where you could play a head-to-head Marvel versus Capcom side-scrolling fighter game, and that's really, really cool that we have that. You could sit down and you can play that, or you could play head-to-head driving games. And it's really, really a great experience for friends to come in and play together. We have the ability for kids to come in with their parents. Kids can come in if they're over our age limit. Parents can send the kids in on their own, and parents can go off and they can do things as a couple, or families can do things as a couple out in media, while their kids are safely in our space playing video games and pinball machines. And we also can offer birthday parties. We offer private parties. We offer the gambit, and we offer access to that video game arcade space for people to play. We also have, as you mentioned, a dedicated virtual reality space where we have on the order of 20 virtual reality games that you could try out for a separate fee as well. And there you have it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. The fact that it also gives people a chance to check out virtual reality for the first time, because while things like Oculus Quest and PSVR 2 exist, true virtual reality to the level of what the Cosmos Elite can provide is sort of out of most people's price range. So the fact that they can come in here, give it a shot, see if they like it, I really do enjoy that. But I do have one question that goes back to the inclusivity portion of this. I'm noticing that while you have a lot of different games, none of them fall in the, how should I say this, mature area. I mean, you have console games. I'm not exactly sure what console games you offer, but I'm noticing that everything is kid or family friendly, ESRB friendly, which is probably more important. So if someone wanted to come in there, pay some money, and play Call of Duty, which is an M-rated game, 17 plus, are they able to do that? If so, great. If not, is that because there are restrictions in place, either self-imposed or otherwise, that are there to keep this a family-friendly area?
So what we have done is, thanks for asking that question. We do not have Call of Duty, and that was a very conscious decision on our part. And we did want to make sure that parents can feel safe that their kids are playing the games that they want them to play.
Okay.
On our Xbox. So we have Madden 22, for example, on that Xbox machine, ready to play. And we have the Lego series games on that machine. But we've avoided games like Call of Duty for that reason.
You just want to. That makes perfect sense, because you don't want a parent who may restrict those games at home to come in and find out that they're playing those games in your facility. And honestly, you don't need it. You said the magic words earlier in this interview, and that would be Marvel versus Capcom. So I'm in. So Aimee, walk me through a little bit of your approach to this. Now, obviously, it sounds to me like Dr. Rubin is the gamer, where you're as more of the, I guess, the business side, or you're not as familiar with the game. So what about this appeals to you, other than what we talked about earlier as far as the inclusivity aspect?
Yeah, so it's interesting how we've kind of evolved. I kind of have put the games, that's more of Eric's interest. Eric and I sometimes have conversations of staying in your lane where I can make certain decisions and he can make certain decisions. And, when we were going through, that's not as much of an interest of mine. I enjoy going with him to see what he's picking out. And I had a few requirements, like I fell in love with the Shrek pinball machine and I wanted that. And I needed the skee ball. That was a must. Miss Pac-Man was a must. We just got 2 new driving games. Those are a favorite of mine. I'm really more there day to day, doing the day-to-day operations, more of the idea person and coordinating everything. And we both go for the candy. We went to the candy convention. So it's really been a true partnership, and we really work together and kind of put our skills together to make it work. And I just wanted to offset something that he said, which is we do come at this from the perspective as we're parents. I was an elementary school teacher. He's a physician. We came out of this, we're not out of this pandemic, unfortunately, yet, but we had that perspective that we wanted families to come back and play together. And we wanted them to be able to do this safely. And we thought of this as parents, as teachers, as physicians. And one of the things that was very deliberate was having a time play arcade where you could sign up your children ahead of time for them to meet their friends, pay ahead of time, have a time slot. And that's wonderful to see, is to see kids coming and meeting up, playing together, laughing together. They're not on their phones. They don't even look at their phones. They're cheering each other on as they're playing the Flyers bubble hockey. That's a huge highlight for me. Seeing grandparents come in with their grandchildren, doing the same thing. It's just cross-generational. And obviously the inclusive piece is just a huge part of what we are doing, and it just is evolving. So 20% of our employees are customized and supported employees. Some of them come with an assistant, and we have customized jobs for them. We have one who is in a wheelchair and uses a talker. His name is Pedro, and I will have him, hopefully he'll be listening to this. And on Christmas Eve day, he programmed a holiday story into his talker. We had kids come, listen to the story, have cookies, Santa came, and it was this wonderful thing that evolves in the arcade. Yeah, seeing children, seeing individuals who may not look exactly like them, but who are partaking in the same thing, and it kind of takes the stigma out of it, that everybody has a place there. And that is why we are called Game on State Everybody's Arcade.
Love it.
So
absolutely love it. That is, I wish I was there to hear that story. Maybe next year if you do it again, I'll bring my girls, and as long as the one can sit still, we'll be able to pay attention.
Well, we are going to do it on a regular basis. It's not just going to be the holiday. Pedro's there every Friday
from
12:30 to 4:30. He's kind of our ambassador. He will greet you at the door. He will tell you about candies and can help you in whatever way he can.
Awesome. That is awesome. I look forward to meeting Pedro, and if you're listening, I look forward to meeting you very, very soon, sir, because the more we talk about this, the less I'll be able to resist coming and hanging out. So I have 2 more questions for you before I let you go. The first one is, you've now mentioned it a couple of times. My interest is piqued. Let's talk about candy. So you seem really high on this candy shop, or at least the candies that you're offering. What's the deal with the candy?
Candy. So, I have a bit of a sweet tooth, and again, we were very, very lucky to find a space on State Street that has enough room not only for all of the things that we've already talked about, but and I'll mention actually 2 things, both candy and one other thing. And I'll mention the other thing first. The first is that the back of our store actually is relatively open space. Although we have the console games and the television set up back there in the virtual reality space, we call it flexible space. So not only did we have Pedro, which was great, reading stories to those who came and visited on that day, but that's the kind of thing that we wanted to open up and do more of. We have a very open-ended view on what we can do in that flexible space, whether it be the magic show that we have currently scheduled in the next couple of weeks with a professional magician coming in to do a close-up mentalist show.
Oh, cool.
Or anything else that anybody would want to come in and talk to us about doing. We've even talked to the school district about doing projects. That's one additional facet of this business. But in front, we have 400 square feet of candy space, and Aimee and I have investigated candy since February. As she mentioned, we went to the annual candy convention, and we spend a lot of time looking at and thinking about what would be best to have in that space. Not only the newest types of candies that you would see, for example, on TikTok, but also those candies that we remember from when we were younger. Things like Wacky Wafers and Necco Wafers and Double Bubble. So Abba Zaba bars and a variety of other nostalgic candies, but we also have things like slime liquors, and we have sour spray, icy sour spray, and we've really tried, again, to make it a variety for anything and everything and anything that somebody would want to come in and expect to find in a candy store. And we think it's pretty successful. I think that people are pretty excited when they come in. They're pretty amazed and surprised when they start looking at our walls of candy. I don't think it's something that has been seen in media for a very, very long time, if ever, that I know of. So it's a unique experience to come in and to see that and to browse and pick out some things. We also have bulk candy in the space. You can make your own mix of bulk candy, wrapped bulk candy in there if you so choose.
You just keep sweetening the deal here. I mean, it just gets better and better the more I hear about it. First it was video games, now you're talking about candy. Next you're going to tell me that you're going to start opening after hours for adults only and start serving beer. But that's, one thing at a time.
Well, we are speaking of beer.
Oh man, here it comes.
So we are a BYOB. We have BYOB for closed private parties. That is allowed. That was one of the things we had to amend a code in the borough. And while we are not allowed to have a liquor license, they did allow us to have BYOB for private parties, which people are certainly starting to take advantage of. We have a fabulous party space. We've had 50th birthday parties, 40th birthday parties, and we even had our first wedding.
Wow.
A couple weeks ago, and that was a wonderful evening. We have bar and bat mitzvahs coming up, so people have really found that the space is a place for everyone, and we can make it to your liking and decorate it as such, or you can just come, have some pizza, have some beer, watch the Eagles game, and play video games. So it really runs the gamut. Everything is on our website, gameonstate.com, and you can see available dates right there for parties, but they are becoming a very popular option. So if you are thinking about it, I suggest that you book early.
Well, there you go. I said I had two more questions, but the question after candy was parties, and you answered it before I even had a chance to ask it. So thank you for that. I see that your hours are Wednesdays through Wednesday through Sunday. Wednesday, Thursday, 12 to 8. Friday, 12 to 10. Saturday, 3 to 10. And Sunday, 3 to 6. So if you're in the media area or if you're visiting from out of town and you want to check out a great place to play some arcade games, just chill. Maybe even, if you're having a private party, bring your own beer and just hang out and watch the Eagles game. Like she said, Game on State is the place to do it, right there on State Street in Media. Rubin's, Aimee, and Dr. Eric, thank you so much for your time and your information here today. I look forward forward to seeing this grow until it takes up an entire State Street block, and you just have a huge building where everybody can go and play video games as much as they want. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. Great talking to you.
And with that, we are at the end of episode 80 of Cheesesteaks and Controllers on Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also on Amazon, Spotify, and Apple Music. I really appreciate you listening to us this evening. Hope you enjoyed the interviews with both the Rubins and Steve Fallon of Fantasy Critic. A lot of interesting information going on there. We will be back next week with number 81, as usual, talking about the esports and the video games that we love. So, thank you. Have a great weekend. Have a great week right behind it. And we will talk to you next Friday, next weekend, with all the latest and greatest in video games. Goodbye.